Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the AJ Steele Show. A couple of days ago, I saw a tweet on X which truly moved me. It was from a young man named James Grant. James sat in a federal prison for 3 whole years. 3 years for the crime of standing up for a free and fair elections on January 6th. James, who was 28 years old at the time and about to attend law school, was locked up and removed from society like a common criminal, like a rabid dog. He didn't hurt anybody. He didn't break anything or steal anything. He didn't set any fires or call for the murder of fellow Americans. But unlike those who did, members of Antifa and BLM and the illegal alien gangs and Muslim terrorists rampaging through our streets and burning and beating and looting and threatening and rarely facing anything more than 24 hours in jail, unlike them, James was facing over 100 years in prison for being a Trump supporter. 100 years. Now look, before you start accusing me of being a partisan hack or a crime apologist, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been a supporter of the law and law enforcement my whole life. My dad and uncle were cops. I never did any drugs. I never even smoked a cigarette my entire life. Okay, I admit I got drunk twice. Once when I turned 21 and my friends took me out, and the other time was when my band was in Europe touring. But my point is this: I don't excuse any type of bad behavior, not from my kids, not from my friends, or not from people whose politics I support. Look, the key to my view of justice is that it should be applied equally and proportionally. Justice should always be blind. And yet under the Biden administration and his shamelessly crooked Attorney General Merrick Garland, it became a two-tier justice system, rife with cronyism, ugly political persecutions of conservative voters, not to mention all the lawfare against Donald Trump and all of his friends. Look, what these people did to us is turn our Lady Justice into a Soviet-style kangaroo court system, where the saying, "show me the man and I'll show you the crime," became more than just a mantra. It became an obsession and a reality, complete with crooked judges, crooked law enforcement system, including the FBI, which became an arm of the deep state. Heck, they made East German Secret Service, the Stasi, and the Russian NKVD look like amateurs. I could go on and on and on. But you know the story. You know the deal. Plus, my interview with Mr. Grant is much more interesting than anything I have to say. But the bottom line is this: I am calling on President Trump to pardon each and every single January 6th prisoner. Unless, and this is a big unless if there's footage of them attacking police officers or other Americans completely unprovoked. Not only that, but I hope that the new Trump administration terminates and prosecutes each and every person involved and responsible for the January 6th lie. And this includes politicians, the media, law officers, and all of their low-life informants and traitors. Put them away. That's the only way America can move on. Only then we can move on with equal justice under the law. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for the fact that so many of you watch and listen to us and put us in the top 10 ratings all over the world. And I hope that you keep telling your family and friends all about us and continue spreading the word about the AJ Steele Show. You can hear us on iTunes and Spotify and iHeartRadio, iHeart Podcast. You can hear us everywhere. As many of you know already, unlike most people in media, I have never asked you for a single dime. I have never asked you for anything other than your friendship and your listenership and your kind words of mouth. This show has always been a labor of love for me. It's my way of saying thank you to the nation that has given me everything that I have. And it's always going to remain this way. Okay, I'm going to have to take my first break, and I hope that you stick around for my interview with James Grant. He's smart and brave, and he went through hell. And despite it all, he never broke. They never broke him. I am AJ Steele, and this is the AJ Steele Show. James Grant was one of the patriotic protesters on January 6th in Washington, D.C. for the crime of standing up for his president and calling for an audit of an election result that were at best disorganized and inaccurate, and at worst crooked and stolen. Mr. Grant was arrested and locked up in federal prison for 3 years. A few days ago, he was finally released, and he put up a viral tweet on X which touched my heart. His post said, "I can't believe I'm out. After about 2 years, I started to believe I was never going home. Thank you, God." Well, 2 million people saw this tweet, and I was one of them. Mr. Grant, thank God that you are free, and welcome to the AJ Steele Show.
It is good to be out, AJ. Thank you for having me. God bless you. Yeah, no, it was a ridiculous situation, and it was a nightmare that went on for almost 3 years. But I'm so glad to be back. I'm so glad to be out. It's still so fresh to me. I don't even have words for it. But thank you for having me.
Well, we're glad to have you. So let's start at the very beginning. You were 28, I believe. You're from North Carolina. You were accepted into a top law school in the fall of 2021 with a full scholarship. So you're obviously not the type of person who lets other people do your thinking for you. And yet somehow you found yourself in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Why were you there?
Well, I think the obvious answer is that the 2020 election was stolen. And we've seen that, they try to argue the point, but we saw the ballots, we saw the suitcases come out at night. We saw President Trump win 18 out of 19 bellwether counties. We saw the numbers change on live TV. And, the Democrats' reaction to this to not allow any, investigation into the fraud, pretty much confirms it. And I'm seeing new studies out now that show that it pretty much was stolen based on, research. And there's something called the Benford's Law, which is basically, and I door knocked for President Trump. Most addresses they start with a one because every street starts with a one. And if you're making up a bunch of addresses, people, 800, a lot more eights are in the distribution. So it's a mathematical law that a lot more ones should be in any given set of data because we start counting at one. And the ballots did not follow this at all. So there's mathematical, there's visual, and there's sworn affidavits from people. So we all but know the 2020 election was stolen. I'm a political science major. I was an outspoken conservative at NC State University, and which was tough. I think you might know how hard it is to be a conservative at the liberal universities today, and
Sure.
that's why I'm worried about getting back into law school. I think it might be a tough task, but just to sum up, I mean, I believe the 2020 election was stolen in every way, and I felt like I had a duty to stand up to that. Yeah,
So did you go to the Trump rally
I did.
before?
I got there a little late. So by the time I heard, I got there late, and President Trump was already speaking. I couldn't get to a spot to see him. And once I heard him say we're going to march down to the Capitol peacefully and patriotically,
Hmm.
I made my way to the front. But I did go there with the intention of going to the rally, but it was so packed too. It was like nothing I've ever seen.
There's over 1 million people there. So you attend a rally, and all of a sudden you're in front of a police barrier next to the Capitol building, right? What happened next?
So, we go up to the barrier, and, I'm out in front. I'm the rambunctious baby of the family. So yeah, I'm always energetic. That's kind of in line for me. But no, I'm at the front with my co-defendant, and we approach the barrier, and I can be seen on camera reasoning with the cops. And this goes on for what felt like a full minute, if not more. It felt like a lot longer. But we're reasoning to get past. And here's the interesting thing: the fence was initially pushed by someone over to the left. And AJ, this is what I want to talk about too. I mean, there's so much to talk about, but this is one of the things I want to talk about is they picked five people out and said, these are the five guys that started the whole thing. You can see on camera, there's about 30 or 40 people pushing that fence. And I don't know that, most of them weren't charged. And I don't know that the person who originally pushed the fence was charged, but they were over on the left and they were not in my group of co-defendants. Of course, Ray Epps was there.
Hmm.
He engaged in activity that other people were charged for and had to take plea deals and were convicted for.
Yep.
So it's just really a lot of questions at the front gate. And my belief is that over 50% of them were federal informants, instigators, or something of that nature.
Wow. Well, we know for a fact that the FBI had at least 26 informants in the crowd, at least, right? What's your opinion of Epps? Did you hear him say anything, or was he just standing next to you? Was he an agitator? Was he a paid informant? What's your thoughts on him?
Well, based on how the FBI treated him, it's pretty obvious he's a Fed of some kind, and that's my opinion. But it's pretty much been confirmed by even sedition hunters. So even people on the left have admitted this. He claimed in a text, "I orchestrated it." So he sent a text that said that.
Oh, wow.
Most January Sixers were charged with obstruction of an official proceeding, which is the charge I have. President Trump was charged with it
Hmm.
until the Supreme Court finally stepped in and dropped the charge.
True.
But you would think saying I orchestrated it. So I was initially convicted of that at trial because I sent two Georgia state representatives emails that said decertify. We saw the fraud. So if I was
Mm.
convicted for that, saying you orchestrated it, you would think would merit 1512 charge. But he wasn't given that. He was
No.
only charged, after massive public outcry, and it's on video. You don't have to take my word for it. But he says to my co-defendant, "We need more people." And again, this is on video. So the reluctance of the federal government to charge Ray Epps is telling. But there's other people at the front gate that have not been charged, to my knowledge,
Mm.
and dozens of them. So that really begs another question: who were these people? That I think a lot of people don't realize. It wasn't just Ray Epps. It's 26 others. There was a young man by the name of Sam Lazar who. So they used to give us something called the Global Discovery Project, which was all the evidence of January 6th compiled into one spot.
Mm.
I never had access to it because I wasn't at the DC jail until later, and they had already gotten rid of it at that time. But they used to give us all this evidence, and the January Sixers would watch it, and people started to notice that this guy Sam Lazar, goofball, he had his face painted with like
Mm.
war paint. He bragged about being the tip of the spear, and he was moving in sync with Ray Epps throughout the crowd, and people were
Interesting.
noticing this. Telling their lawyers about it, and then lo and behold, they removed the Global Discovery Project from us, and we can't watch it anymore. So they've done stuff to cover their tracks, and I think even now they're terrified. It's going to be at least 26 federal informants. I think the number is going to be a lot higher than that. Because that's just one agency, and that's just what they're admitting. That's confidential human sources, I believe. That doesn't
Yes.
account for instigators, agitators, people they offered plea deals to go there and act crazy. So it's going to run the gamut from all kinds of things like that. And I think the real number is in the hundreds or even thousands.
Wow. That's amazing. Just to reiterate, you did not go there because of some kind of a master plan, did you? Were you out there to be an insurrectionist?
I went there to protest the 2020
Mm.
election. I drove up alone from North Carolina. I was an outspoken political science major, and
Yeah.
I wanted to make my voice heard.
That's very important. Now, so you end up in the Capitol. I'm taking you back there. I'm sorry. You end up in
No,
the Capitol itself. What did you do in there? Were you out there to destroy our public institutions and to overthrow the government of the United States of America?
and they don't show this footage, and that's the January 6th committee. So they showed footage of the initial breach. And you can see me actually, there's kind of a scuffle with one of my co-defendants and a police officer. So I reach out to try to pull the guy off and break this up. And his name's Officer, I think he might be a sergeant, but Sergeant Lohman, he comes sprinting in and full force sucker punches me in the face. I wasn't even looking at him. It
Wow.
it actually knocked me unconscious for a few seconds, and I think it might have killed some people if I mean, it was a brutal
That
sucker punch.
forceful.
Right, yeah, and it's you can see it on my X account at James Grant J6. But even my Democrat lawyer was disgusted by this, and he said, they didn't call him as a witness at my trial or anything.
Mm.
But so I wasn't even thinking right after that. I think I was very possibly concussed. Pepper sprayed later on. But the rest of the day after this, incident at the front gate, I was peaceful the whole day. I stopped people from breaking windows, yet we could never find that footage, which would have acquitted me of one of my charges, that 1512 charge. Because if I'm trying to obstruct a proceeding, I want people breaking windows. I wouldn't stop them from
Sure.
breaking windows. So I think this charge would have, this evidence would have acquitted me.
Exonerated you, yeah, for
Yeah, it would
sure.
have exonerated me of that charge,
Mm.
and we could never find it. So I stopped people from breaking windows. There was a streamer named Baked Alaska, and you can see this on the G Parks is I guess the officer's name, but you can see it on his video. I'm calming him down as he's screaming at police officers, yelling expletives at him. So I de-escalated multiple incidents. Once inside the Capitol, I walked around and I took 2 selfies, and this is on my paperwork.
Got it.
Uh, so I didn't do much when I was inside. Yeah, again, but it's funny because if you read the police report, the FBI report, they said he stormed the halls. I literally walked around and took selfies. I was in there for 18 minutes and left. But that's part of it. We can't get a fair trial in DC,
Of
but
course.
it's not just the judges though. A probation officer writes what's called your pre-sentence investigation.
Hmm.
Your lawyers are from DC and they're
Hmm.
super Democrats.
Of
Your
course they are.
jury, yeah, your judges, the guards that hold you. So
I think
it's not
90% of people in DC voted for Kamala, didn't they? Over 90%.
93,
93. Wow.
93%,
I'm in
even
California.
more.
I'm in San Francisco, and even we didn't have 93%. Amazing.
Right,
Amazing.
right. Well, actually, my first lawyer refused my case. She said, and I'm sure she'd represented rapists and murderers,
And that's a
but
public
Trump
defendant,
support.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
the public, yeah, court appointed. I'm sure she's represented pedophiles and murderers, but a Trump supporter that pushed the fences, that was too much for her.
No. Yeah.
And then my next lawyer, court appointed also, he didn't answer one of my phone calls from jail, and I must have called him like 40 plus times. He didn't answer once.
Wow. So going back, you get arrested, you get a trial date, and meantime, the media and government go berserk, and something that was at best a rally that's gone a bit out of control, and at worst is a riot, is now called an insurrection. I can only imagine how scared and paranoid you felt, and what was it like knowing that you had a target on your back painted by your own government? And how did the authorities catch you a second time or arrest you a second time?
Well, this is something I've wanted to address for a long time, and I didn't know if I should, but yeah, no, it was like your life was over because I don't know if anyone remembers the original outrage and the frenzy
Oh
of
yeah.
January 6th,
Oh
but
yeah.
everyone, there was no, it's different now. It's a lot easier. And it was a lot harder being a Trump supporter in general back then.
Oh, I
This
remember.
was, and I think that's how they got away with this deal in 2020 was that, a lot of people didn't want to come out and say I voted for Trump. It's a lot easier now. The
True.
Trump dance is trending online and stuff. It was not easy back then to be a Trump supporter. And after January 6th, literally everyone condemned us
Oh,
from both sides.
I know.
And yeah,
Including many rhinos. That's the painful part.
no, yeah, both sides condemned us. It was, you felt so alone. And that's why I think
I
the
can
number is at
imagine.
8 right now. And hopefully that's the end of it. If President Trump brings everyone home, that's going to stay the number. But 8 people took their own lives
My God.
facing these sentences.
My
And I
God.
can commiserate, and it breaks my heart because I know what they went through. And I know how alone you feel, like the entire world is against you. And then you're facing decades in prison. I was facing 101 years in prison for
My
pushing a
God.
fence that the government eventually admitted didn't touch anyone. I was facing 101 years for that. A law student that pushed a fence.
There's
Um,
there's murderers and rapists in this nation that don't even
oh,
face what you faced. Amazing. Amazing. So they arrested you and you go to trial in front of a federal judge in North Carolina. Isn't that how it's supposed to work?
that's how it's supposed to work. Every town and every city have their own federal facilities and federal
Right.
courthouses. So they could have easily charged us, in our home districts, but obviously they didn't want that because someone in Texas or Tennessee or North Carolina, they might get a fair sentence and,
Yeah,
they
might.
might get probation or not, for walking in the Capitol, they might not even be charged, they may drop the charges. So they made sure to drag everyone to Washington, D.C.,
Hmm.
extradite us across the country. We can't see our families. And like I said, your lawyers from D.C., your probation officer, uh, you know, the judge, they're all from people that are directly affected in the middle of this political frenzy that 93% vehemently disagree with you politically. It's the most Democrat area in the country.
Of course.
Yeah. So, the
Not to
judge,
mention that they make their living off the government, you know? It's like
right,
it's a cycle. They need to keep their jobs, so they're going to go with the government, not with the law.
right. Everyone there works for the government. So on so many levels, we had targets on our back. It was just, it's kind of the result you would expect, but I just can't understate the frenzy that we went through.
Yeah.
And in DC, we find rat droppings in our food.
Wow.
Once the guard disappeared with our lunch and came back, and she goes, "Bon appetit, boys." I mean,
Wow.
clearly she did something to the food. She went off camera with it. It's just not a good feeling to be housed by people that you know, don't have good intent for you,
Well,
quite
I
frankly.
will ask you some questions about that in a little while. I want to get back to the trial.
Sure, sure.
What kind of charges did you face?
So for pushing a fence that did not touch anybody, eventually they admitted that. I had two assault with a deadly weapon charges. I had the obstruction charge, and then I didn't have anything with me that day, but they added into the entering and remaining. They added on with a deadly weapon to three of my charges that bumped those up to 10-year felonies.
Wow.
So 20, 20, 20, 10, 10, 10, and 13 charges in total for 101 years.
My God.
So yeah, and going to trial was the most frightening and horrible experience I've ever gone through. You wake up at 4 a.m. every day from your unit. They take you down to their holding cell where you sit for about 2 hours. Then you get chained in arms and legs with the hobbling chains, which are very uncomfortable and painful. Then you have a 15-minute ride over to the courthouse. You get strip searched, and then you can't even review your paperwork. They put you in a cell. You get a soggy bologna sandwich and cookies for the entire day, for the whole 12 hours. You just sit in a holding cell by yourself. It's freezing. They leave the leg chains on. They do take the top ones off. But, people try to sleep, and you're so exhausted, you are able to sleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, then you go through 8 hours of court proceedings, and then at 5 o'clock, you leave, get back in the chains, come back to your unit, or not to your unit. Sorry, getting premature. You go back to the DC holding cell, wait 2 hours there, then you get back to your unit, and you have to go to sleep real early because you got to wake up at 4 a.m. the next day to do it again. So it was
Wow.
2 weeks of, yeah, it was 2 weeks of that routine. And, I guess it was a high profile case. So there were so mmany people in the courtroom. You feel like they're all watching you.
Yeah.
They are. I mean, there was media there. They're watching you the whole time. I'm in, an orange jumpsuit for some of it.
Yeah.
I did get a suit at one point. I did the Jim Jordan and rolled the sleeves up because I was helping my lawyer. I was a law student, and it felt like it was time to go to work, not to wear so I didn't wear the whole suit. But
Wow.
I mean, it was a long proceeding. It was about 2 weeks, and it was intense. But I was really blessed that I got a judge that obviously I didn't think I should really have served a day in jail, but she could have done a lot worse.
Yeah.
So it was a 2 week trial, and then I didn't get my verdict until 2 months past that, and then
Wow.
they need yeah, right,
Interesting.
and then they need 3 months to do what the pre-sentence investigation. So I didn't get sentenced until 7 months after my verdict, or 6 months after my verdict.
So you're
Um,
sitting there basically with a charge, but without a verdict.
for 1,000 days, I didn't know
My
what I was
God.
going to get.
That sounds like some third world nation that's run by paramilitary juntas. It's not America.
Right. And when I got my final sentence, well, first going back, when I got the not guilty verdict on the serious charges, that was that was the most intense moment there was, that and being sentenced. But,
Yeah.
I'm sitting there and the judge is reading out the charges, and she started with the less serious one, civil disorder, which is a Jim Crow era felony that they gave you basically just for showing up. You get a civil disorder.
Got
And
it.
they used it originally to make the civil rights protesters felons without having real felony content. So
Mhm.
ironically, that was used against us.
Amazing.
When they got to that assault with a deadly weapon that I was acquitted of, when I heard her say on count two, assault with a deadly weapon, not, and as soon as I heard the not coming out, oh my, and I was trying to look cool because I knew there were so many people watching, but I think I looked like I just like voided myself in relief. I mean, I know I made a really weird face because I was just pure, oh my goodness,
No,
like
I can
pure,
believe it. I mean,
Yeah, pure relief because that was the serious charge that I beat that I should have never been charged with,
of
that I was
course.
nowhere near. So, thankfully no injury. I was charged for pushing a fence that didn't touch anyone, but it could have. And for that I spent, 3 years in prison, 32 months. But the sentencing was the scariest part. The judge, we were hoping it was going to go well, but you never know with the January 6th cases. For pushing a fence that didn't touch anyone, the government asked for 9 years in prison. So obviously, we asked for time served. Let me go home. It's been 3 years. And the judge is going back and forth, and she's like, "Well, I don't think you're a violent person, but I do think you guys open the gates for everyone." And she would say something good and then something bad. And I hadn't slept. I didn't sleep a wink the night before. I've been doing push-ups in the cell to try to just
Of
burn up the
course.
energy. And I'm so exhausted, and I've had so much adrenaline firing. And I went first. They're doing my sentence first. And I spoke. I mentioned the horrible treatment conditions, particularly at Northern Neck Regional Jail, because I felt like I had an obligation to talk about it because that place was so third world. It was torturous. They left me locked in a cell for hours, handcuffed. Not a cell, sorry, a holding area, the attorney booth where you meet with attorneys. And they admitted later they did it on a joke, as a joke. But that's the kind of people it was like kids that ran that facility. And that Paul Manafort was there for a little while,
Oh,
but
really?
Northern Neck Regional Jail is a nightmare. And I'm hoping to bring a lawsuit at some point, maybe when we get our pardons. But I spoke about that, and yeah, she said something good, something bad, and then finally she said, I sentenced you to 36 months. My lawyer, he whispers over, "That's time served. I'll pick you up tomorrow." I had to go through about another week or two in jail before they calculated my good time. It was not that simple. Looking back, I really wish it just said time served because there was procedural things. But when the time was calculated, I had actually served 2 months over in prison. I'd served 2 months extra.
Wow.
But I was just glad to get out. I was
Of
very
course.
fortunate for that. But no, I mean, going to trial against the federal government then that's a whole story right there. I'm facing 100 years, and my dad's saying like, if you go to trial, they're going to give you 100 years.
My God.
And people were getting decades in prison, and I didn't think I really did much, but they're saying it's the initial breach and all that.
Yeah,
They're looking for people to hang, and they're
that's
looking to
exactly it.
distract. Yeah, they're looking to distract from the feds that were at the front gate. How there was a guy, and this is the main thing I want to address. There was a guy about an inch to my left, and I find out now he's just been arrested. Now, after
Just
four
now.
years, doing the exact same thing I was doing that I faced a century in prison for, and he isn't charged in that 4 years until 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before pardons are coming. So I think
Mm,
he's a Fed, I
of
believe,
course.
and they're covering their tracks so they can say, "Look, we charged him. Is he going to face 100 years? Where was he? You knew who he was this whole time, and you didn't charge him." So on the Fed front, so much more is coming, and it's going to be exposed. And I hope it gives Donald Trump the political capital to pardon everybody that is not a Fed. Because I think my situation is a great example of how feds and non-feds are treated, because we have people doing the exact same thing at the exact same moment. One faces 101 years, the other doesn't even get arrested until 2 weeks before pardons.
Wow.
So
I can't believe this is America. I have a few questions for you that came from my listeners and followers, and if we can do kind of a rapid question and response.
yeah,
A friend of
yeah.
mine, Jack Maxey, who used to co-host the Steve Bannon show, wanted to know if you felt abandoned in prison, and were you aware that there were so many of us out there who support you and all the J6 prisoners?
So I had the misfortune of, like I said, being sent originally to Northern Neck, which is a nightmare for-profit private jail
Mm,
in Virginia, and it is an absolute hellhole. The food portions are smaller than what I got in elementary school, and they're all disgusting crumbled soy. It's basically soy every day. It's a nightmare. I mean, the push button, the water's cold. It is. I didn't have underwear for the first 2 weeks there. I mean, they don't give you anything they're supposed to. It was a nightmare there. And unfortunately, I wasn't originally sent to DC where people would know where I was. So I got to say, the first 6 months, I felt like I was in a CIA Blackwater site somewhere and no one knew where I was. I didn't meet another January 6th until like 4 weeks in. And then finally I started to. But those beginning months were absolutely the hardest. And I didn't feel like anyone knew where I was. And like I said, the whole country almost denounced us without exception.
yeah.
So in the beginning, I did feel like, it was me against the world, and I didn't have anyone on my side. But that changed when, I started to meet January Sixers and people found out where I was. That did change, but definitely in the beginning. Yeah.
Very, very depressing. And let me ask you, were you in the general population? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. Yeah. The entire time in Northern Neck is there's no, and at Lewisburg. So I was at Northern Neck, USP, Lewisburg, and then the DC jail. And the only one where I wasn't in general population was the DC jail. But the first 22 months I spent in general population. And Northern Neck, there was a couple J6ers. Lewisburg, there was about 20 of us. So Lewisburg is the UFP, maximum security federal prison. We were in a pretrial area, but there was other DC inmates
Got it.
from DC and a lot of cartel guys. So it was about one third cartel, one third predominantly African American DC inmates, and then one third January Sixers. And yeah, no, I mean Lewisburg was crazy too because
Scary.
yeah, I mean you could feel first of all the guards were all like 6'5". I don't know where they found these guys, like huge, massive. Like they don't hire anyone under 6'2".
My God.
And yeah, you can feel the energy on them. Like you could just say like I know terrible things have happened here. Like we were separated, so it was the pretrial block. So I was with general population inmates, but when we would walk out to rec in the yard, with the giant walls, I mean the place looks like Shawshank Redemption. But when you walk out there and you feel their eyes on you, it's extremely unsettling. I mean, walking out there is just their eyes on you. These
Yeah,
are maximum security prisoners, and it's just there's an intensity there, and the guards have a really high. And I think I pick up on that kind of stuff.
of course.
Some of the guys, yeah, some of the guys liked it. I didn't. I didn't like it. I didn't like the high anxiety, high tension atmosphere. But yeah, all of it was general population.
I don't think any normal person could deal with that. A follower named California Girl asked, I would like to know how he coped and handled family and friends who rushed to judgment against him. And also, what advice do you have for others who have family and friends that still believe in a false portrayal of January 6th?
So that's what, spurred me on to make this video highlighting everything wrong with January 6th. Because there was a guy, Ralph Arthur Camacho, a DNC anti-Israel protester, who punched a female police officer in the face and slammed her against the wall. And he was given 48 hours of community service. I pushed a fence that didn't touch anyone, and I served 3 years. So anyone rushing to judgment, I think at this point, you almost have to be willfully ignorant of it, of the reality of it.
Yeah.
I don't believe the poll numbers. I think most people think January Sixers need to be pardoned. These are the same people that said Kamala was up 3 points in Iowa. So I don't
She's
know
being
that
sued right now, that pollster. You know that, right?
I hadn't heard that. She
Yes,
should be because that's propaganda. That's not a poll.
of
There's
course it
no
was.
way. But to anyone rushing to judge, yeah, no. I mean, I had my family thought I was stupid, and a lot of people said I was stupid for giving up a law school scholarship. But I wasn't going to be able to look at myself in the mirror and ask other people to stand up to protest an election, and I wasn't going to do it. I mean, so you try to live a life without regrets. Obviously I don't wish I did 3 years, but I sleep great at night. So,
Yeah.
and anyone that's, yeah, anyone that's struggling with that, with their family, you know, I would just encourage them to look at the facts. I would highlight the double standards, but, I would hope that's better now being almost 2024 and almost 2025. And, I would hope if they hadn't realized it now, I don't know if there's any hope because I don't know how much more the double standard needs to be pointed out. I mean, it's,
The indoctrination of our children and our parents and the grandparents is unbelievable. Someone named Ina Ross 7 wanted to know what kept you going and if you think that all the J6s should be pardoned by Trump.
so what kept me going was God. And a lot of people find God in prison, and that's because God is closest to the broken. And you can see you just can see everything. It's a lot of people that jump off bridges to commit suicide. They immediately, the ones that survive, obviously, immediately say, I realized all my problems were fixable. So it
Wow.
really, I shouldn't have done that. And they regret it immediately. It's just really sad. But, it gives you great perspective on everything. And, that really got me through. And the mail I received, we received a ton of letters from people and support and money on our books. So, that kept you going and did everything. But anyone who's not a Fed, absolutely, Donald Trump should pardon everybody that is not a federal agent. You know, as you saw, I got sucker punched right at the start of the whole thing for
Mhm.
trying to help. I was trying to pull someone off of a protester, and he could have killed me. I mean, I wonder if I would have fallen back and hit my head. Well, I mean, it was a brutal sucker punch from a massive police officer. So they were violent from the very start that day, and they instigated. And there's incidents where a guy was pushed off a ledge that could have killed him, and they did kill 4 protesters that day.
True. True.
So it shows how much of a stranglehold they have on the media, that the narrative is still that, the January 6th, four of
They
them were
killed
killed.
cops. I know. No cops died that day. We know that for a fact, but that's the narrative.
Right. And like Winston Churchill said, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth puts its pants on. And that's their MO, is they lie. And now it's almost like too late to correct it. They would have never gotten away with these prison sentences had the truth been told from the beginning, that 4 protesters died, but 0 police died. Had they said that from the beginning, there would have been outrage. But they told this lie. And I talked to inmates that when I explain this to them, they say, "Oh man, I thought y'all just killed the 2 cops." 2 cops, first of all. No, I mean the misinformation about January 6th,
Yeah.
and it's like too late to correct it. So it's all been predicated on a false narrative,
Everything. True.
So
James, Coleman Mooring wanted me to ask you if reports of cruelty by the staff at the DC jail are true, and if so, do you plan to file a lawsuit for civil rights violations?
yeah, I absolutely plan to file a lawsuit against DC, against Northern Neck. I mean, they tortured us, and it's not a good idea to have people in charge of other groups of people that they hate and they politically disagree with. Now, to be honest, I think conservatives, I would not treat someone like that because they disagreed with me politically. But these people, they did, and they sought to get us hurt. Like I said earlier, there was mice droppings in the food. They didn't care. They didn't let us out for sunlight like ever. They would make excuses. They would trick us and say, "Hey, outdoor rec," really early in the morning. So we all got up at 6 o'clock, and then they would say, "Oh, they canceled it," and they would do this stuff regularly. We went months without sunlight, like literally months. You get bruises everywhere. Your teeth start to bleed. You need sunlight really
Of
bad.
course.
Um,
Vitamin
you know,
D. I mean, it's very important.
Right. So you couldn't trust the food. You weren't getting sunlight. Medical care was non-existent, like non-existent. That's why several J6ers contracted cancer, or the ones that had cancer. A lot of them are not, and the prognoses are not good because you are not going to get medical care. You're literally just not going to get it. We had a guy walking around with a ACL torn for months. The guy's hobbling around. They don't do anything. It is beyond terrible care. And if your lawyer starts to make waves and ask for you to get care, that what they do is they ship you out. But at least here, you're not in general population, in DC like I was everywhere else. So I absolutely plan to sue. They tried to get us hurt in other ways. They tried to, and I heard they were successful in bringing in other PC inmates because they put us on involuntary protective custody because of our high profile status.
Yeah.
And then while I was still there, they tried to get us removed from that by bringing in other PC inmates that obviously weren't going to, jive with us. And so, you admitted we're high profile and we need to be in our own unit. And then, they tried to bring others in. I remember asking, because they had a meeting about it, and I asked them, well, what's changed? The elections still hasn't even happened yet. I mean, if anything, it's now more than ever, is it contentious? And they dodged the question like 30 times. And I said, well, I asked it again. I said, well, you never answered. She said, we answered. Just because you don't like the answer doesn't mean anything. And what answer? What was the answer? So it was extremely frustrating. And yeah, I plan to sue. I'm hoping, once everyone gets out, we can bring lawsuits, because the treatment we got there, it was beyond anything else. And, I was in 3 facilities. I know what it's supposed to look like a little bit. So.
Wow. James, our time is starting to run a little short, so let me ask you a personal question. What kind of a place are you mentally right now? Did these bastards break you?
Early on, it was tough and it was a marathon. And the hardest part for me, I think they torture every January 6er in a different way. And to me, as a law student who's, charismatic and, I like to think I'm handsome, you know,
You are. You're very good looking.
thank you. Thank you. They,
You don't want me to tell you that, right?
no, I appreciate it. You can tell me. but I think they saw me as a threat, and they said, he makes videos. I used to have a TikTok with like 29,000 followers,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was shadow banned for speaking out against illegal
Of
immigration.
course.
Yeah, TikTok is bad. They banned my most recent account for misinformation with my J6 video. There was not
Really?
one thing factually incorrect on it. They allow murder conspiracies on there, but I guess a January 6th truth video is too much.
No.
Um, but mentally, I was in a depression looking at these
Yeah.
when I first got out. I was looking at these articles. I was acquitted of any charges with injury. I was found not guilty of 5 out of 9 charges. Like, I beat the slew of them. And they literally, and I think this is coordinated in the lie, they just lie and say I was convicted. And that's why I'm suing the media now. You can donate at givesendgo.com/fake news. We're really close to our goal. $10,000 retainer. We're really close. And there's no defense against lying, but it was like it was done on purpose. And
Yeah.
I don't know why they did it. Well, I know why they did it, to try to stop me. And that took my triumphant verdict away, and
Of course.
my victory, and it can never be retold. That was my sentencing hearing, and now so they robbed me of that because law student beats most charges. That's not what the narrative they want to tell. I'm sure if I was convicted on all charges, they
Oh,
literally
that,
leave that out of the article.
of
Yeah, he
course.
was convicted on all. They leave out that all the articles. I defy anyone other than the Gateway Pundit to find an article that says I was acquitted of any of the charges, even though I was acquitted of most of them. So I'm planning to sue them. But
Good.
no, I went into a brutal state of depression,
I
AJ.
believe it.
And I only snapped out of it when I was able to get a job door knocking for President Trump. And that's like my dream job, is annoying people to vote for President Trump. So that helped me find a sense of purpose. And now I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to.
Good.
You're
Good.
not going to break me. So I'm in a great place mentally right now. I got great people like you interviewing me.
Thank you.
I'm back. So thank
I'm
you.
so happy to hear that. I have a lot of respect for you, and you seem like a strong person who always forges ahead. How can my listeners learn more about you and hear about your future plans?
So I'm still kind of figuring that out, but I'm going to make videos in the meantime. You can follow me at X at James Grant J6. And I haven't really, I don't know exactly how I want to tell my story, but right now I'm just throwing content out wherever on the X page, on the YouTube. I did a huge video release showing all the problems with January 6th,
Good.
because we do need to pardon everybody that's not a Fed. The violence was instigated by the Capitol Police from the start, as we saw. But going forward, I'm really trying to hopefully get back into law school. And I feel like if I don't tell my story, they're going to tell it. And they literally just lie and omit details that make me sound good. So it's kind of exhausting, and I'm exhausted, but I feel like I have to be my own PR firm because they can just lie. But no, I'm very excited to announce that I'm bringing this lawsuit against the fake news. That's ridiculous. They wrongfully tell the world that I assaulted and injured a police officer. I mean, that's about as egregious as an example of defamation as you could get. So givesendgo.com/fake news. We're really close to our goal, and I'm really excited to announce that. So
Good for you. I was going to ask you what your future plans are, but you already told me. So let me ask you the second part of what I was going to ask you. What kind of future do you see for our nation?
So we were done if we didn't win this election. And, we have to go through with mass deportations. If you snuck into the country, that's a crime and that's illegal. And, we can't have this anarcho tyranny where the left is able to do things and they don't get in trouble. And then, like the January 6th example, people get decades, for what they don't even go to jail for. So, our country needs to get back to what made it great in the first place. And you have to have laws. We have to have rules that people follow. And that's what, the January 6ers were fighting for. I think President Trump is the best president in my lifetime for certain. And, that's why they shoot at him, and that's why they're scared of him. And I believe that's why they killed JFK. You can't go against them like that. But President Trump is. And, we need a strong, patriotic country that follows its laws. Hoping to, go to law school and become, a productive, strong, conservative lawyer. But our country, absolutely, I think the number one thing we have to do is mass deportations. I mean, you don't have a rule of law, and it's literally in the definition of the word country. A nation is a defined territory, a sovereign defined territory. You don't have that if you don't have a border. So going forward, I think we absolutely have to enforce that.
As an immigrant, I couldn't agree with you anymore. It took my family many, many years to come to America and to prove that we'll be worthy and that we will have a job. Many, many years it took us to come here. And then everybody else comes here, and they don't have love and they don't have respect and they don't care to become a part of the melting pot, which is what made America so great in the first place. James Grant, thank you so much for coming on the AJ Steele Show. I wish you all the best, and I know that you will pull out of this with your head held high because you have a full, beautiful life ahead of you. Thank God for what He's done for you.
Thank you, AJ. God bless you.
Thank you.